A comeback. My late blooming success in the world of Greek mythology. Chapter 41. While a silent war concerning creation was about to unfold between the raging flames of the volcano and the cold iron of the deep sea. In another corner of the world, a far grander act of creation was quietly taking place. This had nothing to do with profit, and nothing to do with war. It only concerned the vision a lonely, far-sighted deity held for the future of this world. The earth was fertile, the oceans vast, and the sky clear. Beasts ran through the forests, and birds sang in the clouds. All things followed the most ancient instincts, growth, and then decay. This land was beautiful, yet empty. It was like a magnificent theater, complete with scenery, but still waiting for its true protagonists to arrive. The gods on Mount Olympus were immersed in their own loves and hatreds. But not all deities confined their gaze to that place. Prometheus, son of the Titans, was walking across a silent, vast plain that had not yet been named by any sentient being. His name meant forethought. His eyes could pierce the mists of time and discern the future that had yet to arrive. He saw beasts bowing their heads to drink and plants growing towards the sun, a world full of life, yet lacking meaning. A deep loneliness, stemming from the oldest deities, gripped his heart. The Creator stopped walking. He felt that this world needed a new, nobler kind of existence. Such beings should not only know how to bow their heads, but also how to look up. They should not possess mere instinct, but wisdom. They would become the stewards of this world, the bridge between the gods and all creation. Prometheus came to a river near Panopeus. The earth here was fine and pure, seemingly retaining the warmth of creation's dawn. The river water was clear and sweet, reflecting the eternal, unchanging divine light of Mount Olympus. Prometheus slowly knelt down. Using the hands that had wrestled with gods and caressed all things in the world, he cupped a handful of sacred water and gently mixed it with the earth beneath his feet. He was not exerting strength, but performing an act of creation that was incredibly sacred and focused. The clay gradually took shape beneath his fingertips. It was not the form of any beast, nor the appearance of any spirit. It was the image of a god. It possessed balanced limbs, a smooth forehead, and a perfect skull capable of holding wisdom and thought. He endowed the clay figures with the ability to walk upright. Unlike other animals that looked down at the earth, preoccupied with survival. They would stand straight and gaze up at the brilliant starry sky above. That was where the gods resided, the source of wisdom and inspiration. Soon, the riverbank was filled with these silent, lifelike figures made of clay. Their forms were perfect, their muscles distinct. Yet, they were still inanimate. Their eyes were shut, their chests motionless, they had no breath, and no heartbeat. Prometheus looked at his creations, a blend of creative joy and unsatisfied incompleteness intertwining in his heart. Just then, a cool, rational divine power, devoid of any emotional fluctuation, quietly descended. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, appeared silently beside him. She had not been invited. She was drawn by the sheer magnitude of this unprecedented act, which was filled with skill and creation. Her birth stemmed from the head of the god king. Her domain was the ultimate embodiment of wisdom and skill. And before her, the grandest act of creation, concerning both wisdom and life, was taking place. She could not be absent. Prometheus. Her gray eyes calmly observed the clay figures. You have shaped perfect vessels. But you cannot give them true souls. Prometheus turned and paid his respects to the god king's most favored daughter. I wished for this world to have beings, other than gods, capable of understanding, beauty, and wisdom. I wished for them to look up at the stars. Athena was silent for a moment. A flicker of approval crossed her eyes, which seemed capable of discerning everything in the cosmos. She saw the infinite potential within these nascent bodies. She saw a new medium through which wisdom could be inherited and evolved. And so, the chaste goddess slowly stepped forward. She removed her helmet, revealing her solemn and sacred face. She bent down and gently breathed a sacred essence into the clay figure closest to her. That essence was neither wind nor physical matter. It was the spark of spirit, the seed of wisdom. Om. It was like the first heartbeat of the cosmos. The tightly closed eyelids of the clay figure trembled slightly. His chest rose and fell for the first time, clumsily yet undeniably real. He opened his eyes. For the first time, the image of the world was reflected in those eyes made of clay. Immediately, a second, then a third. Athena's spiritual energy, like a wildfire starting from a single spark, instantly ignited the entire silent field. All the clay figures came to life. They gazed upon this new world with curiosity, ignorance, and fragility. They were naked, completely unaware of cold or danger. They possessed life, yet were utterly confused about its meaning. Athena looked at these newborn beings, full of infinite potential yet terribly fragile, and a complex emotion flashed in her gray eyes. She turned and looked at Prometheus. You created them, and therefore you must be responsible for them. This is your destiny as a creator. Having spoken, her figure dissolved into a faint light and vanished from the spot. Prometheus did not reply. He simply looked at the children huddled together before him, like frightened lambs. His ability to foresee the future, at this moment, no longer brought him the pride of creation. Instead, it brought endless, heavy pity. He saw their future fate. He saw them shivering from the cold in dark caves. He saw them dying with wails beneath the claws of fierce beasts. He saw them eating raw flesh and drinking blood due to ignorance, and groaning in pain from disease. He saw them prostrating themselves below Mount Olympus, offering humble prayers to the temperamental gods, only to receive not a shred of compassion. Prometheus slowly extended his hand. The human closest to him, a slightly bolder one, hesitated for a long time, then tentatively placed their small, dirt-covered hand into his warm palm. In that moment, Prometheus made a monumental decision in his heart, one that would force him to oppose the entire system of the God King. Creation was not over. No. For him, and for these children. Everything had just begun. He would become their enlightener, teaching them language and imparting knowledge. He would become their protector, driving away fierce beasts and bringing them light. He intended to truly nurture these fragile clay figures into the rightful masters of all creation, capable of managing this world. Even if he could foresee the price, being consumed by fire and chained by the God King for eternity. He would not regret it. Deep within the volcanic kingdom, a silent revolution was underway. Hephaestus stood before the core of the Forge of Destiny. Before him was not molten metal, but an incredibly complex optical rune matrix projected by Lihua. The anti-counterfeiting mechanism for the volcanic seal had been designed. But a new bottleneck had emerged. The current branding process still required him to personally split off a wisp of his divine soul, like the most precise carving knife, to perform the final fugue for each product. This was acceptable for small batches of custom items. However, for the massive influx of assembly line products that were soon to arrive, this was tantamount to a deity performing the work of a piece-rate laborer. The efficiency was too low. His goal was to transform fugue, a personal craft of an artisan, into an industrial process that could be precisely replicated and mass-produced. He intended to create a divine power lithography machine. A fugue matrix capable of stably carrying his divine power and laws, and copying them onto countless products. After several days of deduction, a preliminary model had taken shape in his and Lihua's minds. Just as he was about to begin the first prototype forging, Lihua's emotionless voice sounded behind him. Father God, two powerful divine energy sources have been detected approaching the volcanic kingdom's border. Through divine energy signature matching, they have been confirmed as Apollo, god of light, and Artemis, goddess of the hunt. Hephaestus raised his head from his deep contemplation. The runic light in his eyes slowly receded, and a knowing smile touched the corner of his lips. Open the passage and invite them in. Our distinguished guests have arrived, bringing the raw materials we most need. A moment later, Apollo and Artemis walked side by side into this kingdom filled with the roar of steel and fire. Apollo's handsome face carried a hint of barely concealed eagerness and anticipation. Artemis, however, remained as cool and clear as moonlight, though a faint ripple flickered in her eyes as she beheld the majestic form of the Forge of Destiny. Hephaestus, we have brought what you need, as agreed. Apollo got straight to the point, impatiently opening the divine casket made from the core of a laurel tree. Buzz. A primal will, capable of incinerating all things, erupted. A golden flame, seemingly alive, danced wildly within the casket, like a caged, untamed golden beast. The temperature of the entire core control room instantly rose to a terrifying level. Indestructible true flame. Artemis said nothing, merely unfurling a piece of silk woven from the night. A handful of gravel, emitting a cold, silvery glow, lay quietly upon it. It gave off no chill, yet it caused the surrounding space to collapse, as if even light and concepts were to be swallowed by that ultimate stillness. Eternal moon essence. Hephaestus looked at these two most supreme divine materials in the universe, and even he, in his deep eyes, showed a hint of solemnity. The data stream in Lihua's eyes refreshed frantically at this moment, even showing brief glitches. Father God, unable to analyze. Material level exceeds current database's cognitive limit. Hephaestus nodded slightly. He could feel it. These were no longer mere materials. Ordinary materials operate within the laws, utilizing them. But these two items before him, they themselves were influencing the laws. They were the manifestations of the two fundamental laws of light, heat, and cold stillness in the universe's operation. At least Tier 7, or even Tier 8 divine materials. This was precisely the soul required for those two conceptual divine bows. Excellent. Hephaestus looked at the two deities. The materials are flawless. And I never break my word. Hephaestus extended his hand, and the two divine materials slowly floated into the levitation field before him. But the forging of such divine artifacts is not a task for a single day. I need time to listen to their voices, understand their will, and design the most perfect vessel for them. Apollo and Artemis had no objection to this. After seeing off his two guests, Hephaestus returned alone to his most private forging sanctuary. He sat cross-legged, his mind fully immersed in the two primal and powerful laws. His divine consciousness sank into the deepest sea of consciousness. He did not ponder the shape of the bow, or the trajectory of the arrow. He pondered something more fundamental. The unity of opposites between sun and moon. The creation of light, and the erasure of stillness. The harmony of music, and the slaughter of hunting. He intended to construct within the two bows two sets of divine power engines, capable of perfectly containing and transforming these two extreme laws. The bow body was merely the engine's vessel, the bowstring, merely the energy switch. And the arrows would be the ultimate manifestation of the user's divine authority and will. His divine consciousness traversed, combined, and deduced countless possible structures. Each solution, at the moment of its birth, was personally rejected by him due to a tiny logical flaw. This work had to be perfect. Just as his will was about to touch that most perfect design singularity, poised between existence and non-existence. The Olympus Codex from the deepest part of his soul appeared uninvited. The blank scroll of destiny once again actively turned to a new page for him. It was happening again. Hephaestus understood. Whenever he was about to undertake a conceptual creation, significant enough to alter the world's pattern, this mysterious codex would provide him guidance. Lines of golden text, composed of pure laws, began to rapidly construct and deduce themselves on the scroll, as if written by an invisible hand. Two incredibly precise, incredibly complex blueprints for divine bows, filled with the beauty of the universe's celestial movements, were clearly imprinted in the deepest part of Hephaestus's soul. Hephaestus was immersed in this creative joy, and inadvertently, a wisp of his divine consciousness drifted to the previous page of the scroll of destiny. It was the record concerning transcending death. He once again saw that epic, concluding text. Lines of familiar golden runes flowed before his eyes. This time, however, his gaze was fixed, as if by a magnet, on a single word. What the forger thinks, clashes with destiny. I praise his will, and manifest his thoughts. Trading life for death, remaking laws. The first cry of the law-bound weapon, one shot succeeds in destroying the abyss. The volcanic edge first known to the world, creating weapons, creating things, and creating life. This word transformed into an indescribable chill that instantly swept through his entire being from the deepest part of his divine soul. This was not a word an objective, emotionless recorder would use. This was a self-appellation filled with monarch-like majesty, used by a superior being with its own will when describing its achievements. The scroll of destiny, or rather, this entire Olympus Codex. It was not inanimate, not a tool. It was alive. A living, unknown, entity with its own will. An unprecedented, bone-chilling cold instantly seized Hephaestus's heart. Hephaestus slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the two top-tier divine materials before him, capable of reshaping laws, and then at the two impeccably perfect design blueprints in his soul. The creative fervor in his eyes, for the first time, was replaced by a deep, cold scrutiny. Before Hephaestus, two of the universe's most supreme divine materials floated. The undying true flame. The eternal lunar radiance. And in his mind, two flawless divine bow blueprints, personally bestowed by the scroll of fate, silently radiated the brilliance of laws. The blueprints were filled with the beauty of the universe's celestial movements, as if they were the ultimate embodiment of the concept of creation itself. Any true craftsman, upon seeing them, would unhesitatingly offer their soul, just to bring them into reality. But Hephaestus hesitated to act. He simply watched, the creative fervor that once burned in his deep eyes now completely cooled. In its place was a cold scrutiny, as if it could freeze his very soul. That word, like a poisoned needle dipped in the river Styx, deeply pierced the core of his divine soul. It transformed Hephaestus from a chess player who controlled everything into a pawn who doubted the chessboard itself. He began to frantically recalling every detail of forging the transcendent death. When and how did that conceptual blueprint appear in his mind? It was at the precise moment his own inspiration was about to reach a singularity. It appeared seamlessly, perfectly continuing all his previous thoughts, as if it were the ultimate result of his own flash of insight. Had he not seen this word, today, he probably would never have realized that his most proud victory was actually a shortcut that had been arranged. This was the most terrifying part. It didn't force information upon him. It merely, just right, filled in the last and most crucial piece of the puzzle when you needed it most. It made you believe it was your own accomplishment. What exactly was the Olympian Codex? A higher dimensional being treating this world as a play with a script that could be arbitrarily modified. An ancient will sealed within a book, attempting to achieve some unknown, ulterior motive by helping him. Or even, was it the instigator of his transmigration? Countless conjectures, like rampant vines, entangled his thoughts. Just as Hephaestus was lost in this insoluble contemplation, almost throwing his divine soul into this dangerous self-analysis. A light voice, without warning, interrupted him. My friend, your volcano seems unusually quiet today. Hermes's figure gracefully emerged from a ripple in space. He did not wear his all-seeing eye, clearly out of respect for his ally's territory. The chill in Hephaestus's eyes instantly receded, returning to its usual calm. Perhaps it's the calm before the storm. He responded indifferently. Then you're probably right. Hermes's smile lessened slightly, and his expression became serious. I'm not here for business this time. He raised the golden caduceus in his hand. The twin serpents at its top exuded the unquestionable majesty of Zeus, the king of gods. I come as a divine messenger, to convey the will of the king of gods to you, lord of Mount Etna. Hephaestus nodded slightly, signaling him to continue. The king of gods has commanded all deities to gather in Mekone, in the mortal realm. There, gods and newly born mortals will gather to jointly deliberate and establish an eternal rule. Hermes paused, then stated the core purpose of this meeting. When humans slaughter animals for sacrifice, which part should be offered to the gods, and which part can they keep for themselves? This sentence, like a clap of thunder, resounded in Hephaestus's mind. Humans have been born. While he was focused on establishing his volcanic nation, while he was immersed in his conjectures about the torrent of history, still stubbornly, rolled forward along the riverbed already recorded in the scroll of myths. Prometheus had already created the first humans from clay. And now, this famous Feast of Mekone, this critical turning point in mythological history, where Prometheus cleverly deceived Zeus to secure the greatest benefit for humanity, was about to unfold. Hephaestus instantly understood. This was not merely about dividing sacrificial offerings. This was about drawing the line between gods and humans. This was about defining the eternal power relationship between the two races for billions of years to come. His deductions about were certainly important. But that was a massive iceberg hidden beneath the surface, requiring a long time to verify. The Feast of Mekone, however, was a colossal wave already crashing ashore, one he absolutely could not miss. I understand. Hephaestus slowly rose from his throne, the confusion about the unknown in his eyes replaced by the sharp focus of a chess player entering the game. Lihua, while I am away, you will be in charge of all affairs of the volcanic kingdom. Yes, Father God. Lihua responded obediently as always, but this time, a hint of reluctance appeared in her eyes. Please, come back soon. Lihua knew very well that Hephaestus could not control this banquet, but she still uttered this illogical sentence. Hephaestus looked at his daughter, feeling a touch in his heart. He patted Lihua's head. I will. Then he summoned the three Cyclops. I will be leaving the volcano for a while. Do not stop the research on the Soul Fairy, conceive boldly, and I will personally review the first draft of the design. As you command, my lord, the voices of the three giants were firm and resonant. Hephaestus then took out the slender transcendent death, filled with a sense of death's order, from his private armory. He solemnly handed it to Brontes. This is how to use it. A divine thought imprinted the complex, concept overlay, theory into the giants' minds. While I am away, if a critical situation arises, you may use it. If even it cannot resolve the crisis, then even my presence would not change much. My lord, please rest assured. The three giants thumped their chests in salute, their voices strong and clear. After arranging the rear, Hephaestus turned to look at Hermes. My ally, I'm afraid I need one last favor from you. He pointed to his crippled leg. Although my divine body is mature, this innate disability seems to affect my mastery of space laws. Short distance dodging and weaving are fine, but for a distant destination like Mekone, I cannot teleport long distances like you. Upon hearing this, Hermes did not hesitate, a hearty smile appearing on his face. Of course, my friend. You will always have my fastest legs behind you. He extended his hand and placed it on Hephaestus's shoulder. Hold tight. He grabbed Hephaestus's arm, and with a flash of golden divine light, their figures instantly vanished from the heart of the volcano, to Mekone. This was a vast and sacred plain. The sky was higher and the earth more fertile than anywhere else. When Hephaestus and Hermes appeared, many deities had already gathered on the plain. Queen Hera sat high on a magnificent throne, conversing in low tones with several nymph goddesses, though a flicker of barely perceptible disgust crossed her eyes when she saw Hephaestus. Ares, the god of war, idly polished his bronze spear, completely uninterested in such non-combat gatherings. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, stood quietly to the side, her gray eyes calmly watching the distance, seemingly lost in thought. More lower-ranking deities and forest spirits gathered in small groups, curiously observing the sacred venue. The gods had arrived. They were waiting for the commencement of this era-defining feast. Perhaps, during this waiting period, some interesting negotiations could be made with certain gods. For Hephaestus, the plain of Mekone was a chessboard full of variables. Instead of rushing to converse with any deity, he chose a relatively quiet corner and quietly submerged a wisp of his divine consciousness into the Olympian code, deep within his soul. The pages of the mythological scroll automatically opened at his will, precisely stopping at the chapter on the assembly at Mekone. To resolve the dispute over sacrifices between gods and men, the gods and mortals gathered at Mekone. The Titan god Prometheus, representing humanity, slaughtered and butchered a large bull. He hid the delicious meat and organs beneath the foul-smelling cowhide, and cleverly covered the worthless white bones with a smooth layer of fat, making them appear plump and enticing. Zeus, the king of the gods, saw through his scheme but deliberately chose the white bones wrapped in fat, using this as an excuse to unleash endless wrath upon Prometheus and the humans he protected. Hephaestus slowly closed the code. Every detail matched the myths in his memory, without the slightest discrepancy. The inertia of history was awe-inspiringly powerful. Zeus was not deceived. He turned the tables, deliberately choosing the inferior offering to find a plausible excuse for subsequently reclaiming fire and punishing humanity. Hephaestus had no intention of changing the outcome of this event. After all, though he had altered the part of his destiny after his birth, the true Hephaestus himself had left no historical record during that period. The only thing he had done was establish a connection with the sea goddess Thetis, and he had now mended that relationship. Rashly interfering with the course of history would prevent the history recorded in the mythological scroll from becoming his advantage, which would be extremely uneconomical. Just as he withdrew his divine consciousness and re-examined the assembly, a clear and rational gaze unexpectedly met his in midair. Athena, the goddess of wisdom. She still stood there quietly, like a perfect statue of a goddess carved from moonstone. Her gray eyes, which seemed capable of discerning the essence of all things, were now fixed on Hephaestus without reservation, with an almost dissecting scrutiny. After a brief exchange of glances, a faint flicker of hesitation appeared in Athena's gray eyes. A moment later, she made a decision. This most favored daughter of the king of the gods, the most aloof embodiment of wisdom among the deities, took the initiative to step forward. She moved through the noisy crowd of gods like a silent, cool moonlight, arriving before Hephaestus. I've seen the hand mirror you sent to the Moonlight Grove. Athena stopped in front of him, getting straight to the point, her voice calm and without a ripple. A very interesting creation. I don't recall having the honor of selling my work to the goddess of wisdom. Hephaestus's words were ostensibly flattery, but in reality, they were a question. There are no secrets in Olympus that I cannot know, only whether I want to know, and by what means. Her voice was light, yet carried an undeniable sense of pressure. Now, I want to know what your craft truly is, in a more gentle way. What if I don't tell you? Hephaestus countered. As I said, I always find a way, Athena said indifferently. This calm statement, however, carried a threat more penetrating than the spear of Ares, the god of war. Hephaestus understood. The goddess of craft and wisdom had developed a primal, irresistible curiosity about a new concept of creation that could overturn the existing system. He wasn't worried about telling her the concepts of modularization and assembly line. Because concepts are merely ideas. And ideas require a material basis to be realized. Athena possessed supreme wisdom, but she did not have the forge of destiny, nor lihua, nor the divine power of the god of craftsmen to create all of this. I can tell you, Hephaestus said, a glint in his eyes like a chess player making a move. But in exchange, you need to promise me one thing. What thing? Athena's brow furrowed slightly. Recently, there's been a small conflict between me and Poseidon, the king of the sea, Hephaestus said lightly. A flicker of understanding instantly passed through Athena's gray eyes. She immediately recalled the volcanic beast slaughter incident, which Hermes had spread throughout the three realms a while ago. That doesn't sound like a small conflict, she stated calmly. But I didn't expect you to remain so calm during that conflict. After all, Hephaestus shrugged, he hasn't personally thrown his trident into my volcano yet. Why are you telling me this? Athena's tone grew wary. I specialize in strategy. If you need a combat ally, you should seek out gods who enjoy fighting. If it truly comes to direct combat, Hephaestus shook his head, directly addressing her hint, even a few more Ares wouldn't be able to protect my kingdom. So, Athena's gray eyes narrowed slightly, what you want me to do has nothing to do with combat. Exactly. Hephaestus finally stated his condition. Since you've already examined my hand mirror, you should easily be able to distinguish the essential difference between my creations and those malicious counterfeits circulating on the market. He concisely informed her about the trade war, in which the Telchines, instigated by Poseidon, imitated his works and added curses, attempting to tarnish his reputation. I don't need you to fight for me, Princess Athena. I need you to testify for me, in the name of the goddess of wisdom and craft. Declare to the three realms the difference between the works of the volcanic kingdom and those impure objects born in the deep-sea shadows. I need your authority to defend the purity and glory of creation itself. Athena fell into a prolonged silence. In her gray eyes, countless pros and cons were rapidly being weighed. The risk was offending her hot-tempered uncle. But she had always disliked Poseidon's chaotic and violent way of doing things. Moreover, as the most favored daughter of the father god, she did not fear this offense. The reward, on the other hand, was satisfying her curiosity about a new, embryonic civilization. This was a win-win deal. I agree. I have always detested such degenerate acts of using craft to spread plagues. Athena gave her reply. Now, tell me your ideas. Athena's gray eyes were like a silent, deep sea waiting for an answer. My concept is actually very simple. Hephaestus's voice was calm, yet carried a confidence capable of reshaping the world. Your Highness, please imagine that we are going to build a temple. A traditional craftsman would start by searching for the most perfect, enormous piece of mountain rock. He would spend hundreds of years, alone, slowly carving that rock into beams, pillars, walls, and tiles. This process is full of artistry, but the efficiency is extremely low. My idea is, why not disassemble the temple? Let 100 craftsmen who are best at carving columns be responsible only for creating 100 perfect stone pillars that are flawlessly identical in specification, pattern, and divine power-bearing capacity. Let another 100 craftsmen be responsible only for firing 100,000 identical tiles that can be perfectly fitted together. And let another group of craftsmen be responsible only for carving standardized bas-reliefs that can be inlaid anywhere. Hephaestus paused, allowing Athena time to consider. We call these parts, modules. When we need a temple, we no longer have to wait hundreds of years. We only need to assemble these pre-prepared, perfect, modules, according to the blueprints, all within a single day. This is modularization. And when we have enough modules, we can use them to create infinite possibilities. A rational light, as if she had grasped a brand new logos, shone in Athena's eyes. She did not interrupt, signaling Hephaestus to continue. And when we need to mass-produce an item, such as forging 10,000 spears for a mortal army, we can similarly disassemble the process. We break down the steps for forging a single spear into 6 of the simplest, thoughtless actions. Then, we have 6 craftsmen stand side by side. The first is only responsible for putting the ore into the furnace. The second is only responsible for pouring the molten iron into the mold. The third is only responsible for quenching the shaped spearhead in water. The fourth is only responsible for sharpening the spearhead. The fifth is only responsible for assembling the spearhead and the shaft. And the last is only responsible for inspecting the finished product for quality. Every craftsman condenses his life's skill into one single, simple, and highly practiced action, repeating it endlessly. This flowing river of craftsmanship, composed of countless steps, is the assembly line. Its endpoint will no longer be an artwork, produced one per day. Instead, it will be a torrent of weapons, produced one per breath, uniform in specification and stable in quality. And this idea can also be applied to the production of modules. These two ideas can complement each other and unleash immense creativity. As Hephaestus finished speaking, Athena did not remain silent. Instead, she let out a very soft, heartfelt sigh of admiration. I see. In her gray eyes, there was no shock or horror, only the pure appreciation of a chess player witnessing a brilliant, world-class move. If modularization overturned creation, then the assembly line overturned craftsmanship. What she saw was no longer a hand mirror, a temple, or a spear. It was a city-state armed with this concept, capable of rising from the ground overnight. It was an army armed with this concept, capable of transforming from farmers into a torrent of steel within a single day and night. It was the nascent form of a new, terrifying war machine, with efficiency as its supreme principle. A very interesting concept. Athena gave Hephaestus a profound look. That gaze was no longer one of scrutiny, but an equal acknowledgement of another thinker, mixed, of course, with a subtle hint of wariness regarding the future trajectory of such power. The deal is accepted. She did not say another word, turning and silently returning to her seat, her gray eyes settling back into tranquility, as if she had merely listened to an interesting philosophical debate. Hephaestus knew that the seed of the idea had been sown. As for what fruit it would bear in the future, that would be up to the goddess of wisdom to decide. The initial negotiation with Athena concluded, and Hephaestus slowly exhaled. He looked around, beginning to re-examine the chessboard full of variables. Queen Hera's throne was not far from him. The proud goddess seemed to notice his gaze and cast a glance, her eyes still holding that deep-seated disgust, as if she were looking at something vile. Hephaestus calmly shifted his gaze. Ares, the god of war, was impatiently kicking stones on the ground, utterly bored by the peaceful banquet. His eyes swept past the thrones of the 3 major gods, which symbolized the division of the world. Father Zeus sat high upon the symbol of the sky, his majesty undiminished. Poseidon, king of the sea, had a grim expression, radiating the atmosphere of an impending storm. But the third throne, crafted from pure obsidian and soul crystal, symbolizing the underworld, was empty. Hades, king of the underworld, was not present. It seemed this solitary monarch truly had no interest in attending such a lively family gathering. This was expected by Hephaestus, yet it deepened his assessment of the king of the underworld. Poseidon, king of the ocean, was not looking at anyone, he was simply dipping his finger into the divine wine in his cup and slowly smearing it onto the armrest. But Hephaestus could clearly feel a cold, briny gaze, like that of a deep-sea leviathan, locked firmly onto him. He did not avoid it. Just then, Poseidon put down his cup and rose from his throne. His tall figure, carrying a tidal sense of oppression, walked directly toward Hephaestus. The surrounding deities turned their heads, and the atmosphere instantly became subtle. I seem to smell sulfur and rust. Poseidon stopped in front of him, his azure eyes looking down with a cruel sneer playing on his lips. I didn't think a cripple who only hides in caves would dare crawl out to attend the banquet of the gods. It's better than certain ancient things that only dare hide in the shadows of the deep sea, spreading plagues with underhanded methods, Hephaestus replied calmly. His gaze wasn't even on Poseidon, but fell instead on a trembling nymph goddess behind him. Poseidon's eyes instantly narrowed, the anger within them like the surface of the sea before a storm, seemingly calm, but with dangerous undercurrents. It seems killing a lost little pet has given you a lot of useless courage, his deep voice rumbled like thunder from the bottom of an ocean trench. But you should know that fire is easily extinguished by water. Water can also be boiled dry by fire. Hephaestus finally raised his head, meeting the gaze without yielding an inch. Especially when the flame comes from the heart of the earth. It is enough to boil the entire ocean. The air between the two seemed to solidify. The surrounding deities all felt the almost palpable, volatile tension. Finally, Poseidon let out an ambiguous cold snort and turned away. Enjoy your banquet, god of the forge. I hope it's your last. Watching him leave, Hephaestus's expression remained calm, as if the exchange had been nothing more than a harmless greeting. But without the slightest hesitation, he turned and walked toward the other side of the hall. He proactively approached Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, and Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, and offered an impeccable salute. Good day, your highnesses. Both Demeter and Hestia were somewhat surprised, as their attitude toward the rising god of the forge was mostly one of neutral curiosity. Your Highness Hephaestus. Hestia nodded a warm return greeting, her voice as warm as a hearth fire. Hephaestus did not discuss any deals. His gaze swept past the gods toward the nascent humans in the distance, who were oblivious to their future. I see that Lord Prometheus has brought new children into the world, he said, turning to Demeter, who governed all growth, his tone sincere. And your benevolence will be the foundation for their survival and prosperity. However, I see them defenseless, forced to use the most primitive methods to gather sustenance from the bountiful earth, which undoubtedly increases your burden. The fire of the volcano can forge more than just weapons. He bowed slightly. If you require it, I am willing to design a set of farming tools for you and these children that will allow them to cultivate and harvest more efficiently. My flame would be glad to share your labor. For the first time, genuine, heartfelt kindness and surprise shone in Demeter's gentle eyes. You are willing to help them. I am also a creator, Hephaestus replied. He then turned to Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. And you, great Lady Hestia, are the guardian of the Olympian sacred fire, the symbol of family and order. He thumped his chest, where a forge seemed to roar. My volcanic domain also holds my own hearth fire. I know deeply that the core of every flame should be protection, not destruction. My craft can also serve you. Whether it's an oven that makes food more delicious, or a fireplace that makes a home warmer, as long as it helps protect the family you cherish, the flame of the volcano will burn for you. These words contained no negotiation, no demand, only pure respect and goodwill based on their divine duties. Hestia's warm eyes watched him quietly for a long time, and finally, she offered a comforting, affectionate smile. Child, your flame is warm. A simple acknowledgement carried more weight than any alliance. When his gaze met that of Apollo and Artemis in the distance, the twin gods gave him a slight nod, signaling that they would wait patiently. Finally, his attention fell upon the far end of the hall. The Titan Prometheus was standing quietly before a group of nascent humans whose eyes were innocent, filled with curiosity and fear of everything around them. His tall figure was like a mountain, shielding those fragile children from the gods' gazes, whether playful or contemptuous. Just then, the clamor of the entire hall gradually subsided. Zeus, the king of the gods, finally rose slowly from his throne constructed of clouds. His majestic gaze swept across the hall, finally landing on Prometheus. Prometheus, the king of the gods, voice was like rolling thunder. Since you created them and intend to act as their representative, then, begin. Show us your division. Prometheus bowed deeply to the king of the gods. He turned and signaled the prepared servants, who led in a massive bull, incredibly robust and sleek-skinned. Under the gaze of the gods, Prometheus personally took a shining sacrificial knife and swiftly slaughtered the bull. Immediately afterward, he began the division, an act of wisdom and deception, that was destined to be recorded in history. He carefully stripped away all the succulent red meat, the fatty organs, and all edible parts, then completely wrapped them in the foul-smelling, ugly hide of the bull's stomach. This was the first pile. Next, he meticulously piled the remaining, inedible white bones together and, with great skill, uniformly covered them with a thick layer of glistening, temptingly fragrant fat. Visually, this pile of bones appeared far richer and nobler than the rotting meat hidden inside the bull's stomach. This was the second pile. When everything was done, Prometheus straightened up and wiped his hands. Facing Zeus, the king of the gods, and all the deities present, he extended his hand in a gesture of invitation. Great king of the gods. His voice was steady, neither humble nor arrogant. Please, select the portion that is rightly yours, for the immortal gods. Prometheus extended his hand. His posture was humble, yet filled with a silent challenge. The entire plain of Mekone fell into absolute silence at this moment. The gaze of all the gods converged upon the supreme throne. They awaited the judgment of the king of gods. Zeus slowly rose from his throne, which was constructed of clouds and the firmament. His gaze swept over the two vastly different offerings. The pile hidden beneath the foul-smelling ox stomach contained mortal, flesh-nourishing meat. The pile covered by glistening ox fat contained clean, white bones, symbolizing divinity and immortality. The omnipotent king of gods, of course, saw through this shallow trick. In the depths of his eyes, there was no fury at being deceived, only the cold understanding of a chess player who sees his opponent make a move that was entirely anticipated. Expose Prometheus's scheme on the spot. No. That would only win him an insignificant quarrel about insight. But he would lose a golden opportunity to establish an eternal rule. These nascent, fragile, humans, who possessed the form of gods. The first lesson they needed to learn was neither wisdom nor skill. It was reverence. Absolute, unquestioning awe toward Olympus, and toward him, the king of gods. And Prometheus, the forethinker, who carried the blood of the old titans and was filled with ill-timed pity. His love must be punished. His goodness must be defined as sin. And so, Zeus, the king of gods, made his choice. He took a step, descending slowly from the throne with supreme majesty. He walked directly toward the pile of white bones, covered by glistening ox fat, which looked rich and enticing. The gods present stirred almost imperceptibly. In their view, this was undoubtedly the correct choice. That pile of offerings, both in appearance and aroma, far surpassed the other hidden within the foul ox stomach. Only Hephaestus's gaze remained calm as water. Like a ghost from the future, he watched this scene that had long been written. He saw the complex flash of light in Prometheus's eyes, a mixture of anticipation and resolution, just as recorded in the Codex. Zeus stopped before the offering. He reached out, touching the layer of glistening ox fat with a solemn gesture, as if claiming the highest honor. Then, abruptly, he threw it open. Bony, worthless white bones were starkly exposed before all the gods. Dead silence. Absolute dead silence. The gods' expressions of certainty instantly froze, turning to shock and disbelief. They finally understood that this was a deception, an unprecedented, massive trick aimed at the immortal multitude. And the king's performance reached its climax at this moment. Following the long silence came the king's provoked fury, an overwhelming rage capable of changing the color of the heavens and earth. Prometheus. Zeus's voice was no longer mere speech, but transformed into tangible, rolling thunder, violently exploding across the plain of Mekone. The sky instantly darkened. Dark clouds gathered, and lightning snakes writhed. The king of God's wrath was the will of the entire universe. Amidst the king's roaring fury, Hephaestus watched coolly, taking in all the subtle changes in the gods, expressions following their initial astonishment. After the momentary shock, Hera's lips quickly curled into a cold, gloating smile. Ares's face flushed with a bloodthirsty excitement, thrilled by the exposure of the trick and the imminent conflict. Poseidon's eyes were filled with pure mockery, pleased to see another challenger provoke the royal authority. After the initial surprise, Athena's gray eyes quickly regained their composure. Her gaze did not rest on the offerings, but on the nascent humans who were trembling under the gods' pressure. In her eyes, there was no pity, only a cold, almost cruel calculation regarding the future trajectory of this new species. Finally, Hephaestus saw Demeter and Hestia. The two gentle goddesses both revealed deep, undisguised worry and reluctance in their eyes. This is the lie you prepared for the immortal gods. Zeus pointed at the pile of white bones, every word spat out like soul-freezing ice. Prometheus bowed his head deeply, offering no defense. The king of gods' performance continued. He turned, facing all the trembling creatures affected by his rage, and delivered the cold judgment that had been prepared long ago. Let the son of Iapetus gloat over his trickery. But I, and all mortals, shall remember this lesson. I shall refuse to grant the power of unwearying fire to the mortals who dwell upon the earth. His voice transformed into the most fundamental, irreversible law of the world. Zeus stretched out his hand and made a sweeping gesture toward the mortal realm. In that moment, Hephaestus clearly felt a warm law, one that shared the same origin as his own divinity, being violently ripped away from the world. On the distant earth, the sparks of fire, which the nascent humans had just learned to use and which were burning in the ash trees, were all extinguished simultaneously, as if pinched out by an invisible hand. The last trace of light and heat departed from the human world. The mortal realm returned to darkness, cold, and ignorance. Those mortals, who had just tasted cooked food and learned to huddle around a fire to ward off beasts and cold, would once again descend into the miserable state of eating raw flesh and drinking blood. Their civilization was interrupted by force the moment its first spark ignited. Zeus cast a cold glance at the humans, who were huddled together in the cold wind, as fragile as ants. He let out a cold snort, turned, and, transforming into a streak of lightning, vanished into the sky. The banquet broke up in discord. The gods, carrying feelings of satisfaction, indifference, or regret, transformed into streaks of light and returned to their respective dwellings. Prometheus stood alone before the humans, who had lost their fire, were trembling in the cold wind, and whose eyes were filled with terror and despair. For the first time, his tall figure appeared so solitary and tragic. Hephaestus did not leave immediately. He watched the scene before him, and even though he had anticipated it, a feeling of helplessness still arose within him. This was not the end. It was the overture to another, grander, and more tragic epic. Hephaestus's gaze fell upon his own hands. These were the hands capable of easily creating the world's most intense and purest fire. At this moment, when the entire mortal realm had lost fire, he, and his volcanic kingdom, would become the sole, and the final, source of fire upon this dark earth. The gale stirred by the gods' departure scattered the last warmth of the banquet. Only endless desolation and cold remained on the Mekone plain. Though the god-king's oppressive aura had dissipated, a deeper shadow, named despair, enveloped the hearts of every newborn human. They huddled together, using each other's meager body heat to ward off this world stripped of fire. Prometheus stood silently before them, his towering figure like a solitary monument guarding a dying candle. Just then, he noticed it. At the other end of the venue, another figure had not left with the other gods. It was a tall, black-haired deity with a limp. He simply stood there quietly, like an aloof specter, indifferently observing the desolate land. Prometheus spoke slowly, his voice hoarse from suppressing immense grief and indignation. The banquet is over. All the gods have left. Why do you still linger here? Hephaestus turned, calmly meeting his gaze. My legs are not good, I can't walk fast. Hephaestus replied calmly, as if merely stating a fact unrelated to himself. Rather than drawing attention on the way back, it's better to stay and enjoy the aftermath of a good show. There was no sympathy or pity in his tone. He knew that the god-king's gaze might never have truly left. Any hint of extra kindness, at this moment, could bring endless trouble to himself and the other party. A good show. Prometheus's brows furrowed slightly. A deity with impaired legs, this is the first time I've seen one. He scrutinized Hephaestus's crippled leg, a hint of inquiry flashing in his eyes. What is your domain, newborn deity? Does your foresight not include my place? Hephaestus countered with a question, and this sentence, like an invisible key, instantly unleashed the torrent of fate. Prometheus's pupils suddenly constricted. In his perception, the entire world instantly shed all superficial colors. Instead, cold, absolute laws of causality, like destiny engraved on the cosmic cornerstone, clearly surfaced within his divine soul. They were not images, but truths. They were the final, unchangeable judgments that the universe had already written. The first law clearly pointed to himself. He who shows kindness to mortals shall suffer eternal punishment. The second law pointed to the children he deeply loved. Mortals in a fireless darkness shall perish. His heart sank to the bottom. These two laws were exactly as he had vaguely foreseen the worst outcome. However, in this sea of truth constructed from despair, he perceived a third, a new law full of contradictions yet containing a glimmer of hope. An extinguished flame can be rekindled by a cluster of imperfect flames. Immediately after, the fourth law, like a supplementary explanation to the third, was powerfully imprinted upon his soul. The flaws in a god's form can become the perfect cornerstone of mortal civilization. The laws, at this moment, receded. Prometheus's heart gave a sudden leap. He didn't need images, nor any specific visions. Imperfect flames. Flaws in a god's form. Before him stood a deity full of the aura of fire, a deity with an imperfect divine form. He understood instantly. This was hope. A hope on the level of law, absolutely destined to happen, beyond fate. To admit it would be to drag the other party into this abyss that would surely enrage the God King. So, the seer, for the first time, lied about the truth he knew. He slowly withdrew his gaze, and the ancient, unruffled calm returned to his all-seeing eyes. No. Very good. Hephaestus nodded, as if quite satisfied with the answer. He turned to leave, leaving behind a cold, emotionless remark. I don't want to be associated with a criminal who has just angered the God King. Having said that, he did not transform into a streak of light like the other gods. He simply turned and, step by step, limped slowly yet incredibly steadily, walking towards the distant darkness. His retreating figure showed no signs of dejection, instead, it carried a composed sense of order, as if he controlled everything. Prometheus silently watched his retreating figure, that crippled leg leaving deep and shallow, lonely imprints on the vast plain. He looked in the direction Hephaestus had left, then at the humans huddled together, weeping in despair in the cold wind. He finally understood. The conversation just now was a performance. A performance for the true audience, hidden behind the heavens. No involvement. Prometheus whispered, repeating the phrase, and the flame in his eyes, dimmed by despair, rekindled a faint but incredibly firm light. He didn't know who that mysterious deity was. But he knew. At that future point in time he had seen. The place where this deity resided held the only, and last, hope, in this cold world. Hephaestus, far from the Mekone plain, stopped. He turned back, gazing calmly at the land being swallowed by darkness and cold. Prometheus had lied. Whether it was the source of divine fire or the forging of shackles, Prometheus would intersect with him. But the other party chose to conceal it. This was good. Although Hephaestus didn't know what Prometheus had seen, since the other party chose to conceal it, it meant he wanted to put on a show. Then he would play along. Prometheus was a clever and worthy ally. His foresight and Apollo's prophecies held immense value for him. This way, even if history deviated, he could still maintain an information advantage. Moreover, history had already deviated. According to the Mythology scrolls, Prometheus would sneak into Mount Olympus to steal fire from his workshop. But now his workshop was not on Mount Olympus. So, Hephaestus had no idea how the future would unfold. All he could do was set the stage for this play before it began. He took out the resonance stone from his embrace. Hermes, I think I overestimated my own mobility. What? Didn't you say you wanted to take a walk? Tired already? The reply was as cunning as ever. A walk, you see, once I saw the scenery I wanted to see, I naturally got tired. So, how was the scenery you saw? Hephaestus fell into a brief silence, the tall figure standing in the cold wind unconsciously reappearing in his mind. I saw a hero. Hermes' usual light-hearted tone, for the first time, sank when he heard the words, I saw a hero. You should know what it means to be involved with that seer. His voice, transmitted through the resonance stone, conveyed a rare and solemn gravity, befitting an ally. Don't worry, I know my limits. Hephaestus's voice remained calm. The other end of the resonance stone fell silent. In that silence, there was both admiration for Hephaestus's courage and a deep, profound weighing of the future direction of their alliance. Should he gamble his nascent career as a divine messenger for an ally who was becoming increasingly bold, even openly defying the will of the king of gods? Or should he cut his losses and retreat to the old path that, while boring, was absolutely safe? After a long pause, Hermes' voice sounded again, as if he had made a certain decision. Where are you? I'll come pick you up. Thank you, my ally. A sincere smile appeared on Hephaestus's face. I still don't recommend you do it again. Hermes' voice carried a hint of helpless warning. But what if I do? Hephaestus countered. Listen, Hephaestus. Hermes' voice became incredibly serious, a pure solemnity stripped of all cunning and self-interest. I hope you live well, live long enough for our shared commercial empire to spread to every corner of the three realms. But, if there really is a next time, I will still stand by you. Oh. Hephaestus raised an eyebrow, his tone carrying a hint of playfulness. I thought the great god of commerce and thieves would make a more astute choice. Precisely because I am the god of commerce, I understand risk and reward better than anyone. Hermes' laughter rang out again, filled with the confidence and insight of a top-tier businessman. True merchants always make a few seemingly crazy venture capital investments in their lifetime. So, I'm your venture capital. No, Hephaestus. Hermes' voice was distant and firm, as if proclaiming an unshakable truth. You are not a risk. You are a trend that, no matter how one bets, will never result in a loss, and is capable of changing the entire direction of an era. The most astute merchants can always accurately identify and see such trends. And I am the best of the best. When Hephaestus reappeared in the control room at the heart of the volcano, he was not met with the familiar, orderly roar of the past. Instead, there was a dead silence. And the undisguised panic on the faces of Lihua and the three Cyclops. My lord. Brontes' bell-like voice, for the first time, carried a tremor of fear. The furnace's flames, just now, extinguished completely without warning. Father God, the golden data stream in Lihua's eyes flickered wildly in a chaotic manner. This is a law-level extinction event that cannot be analyzed. All systems of the Destiny Furnace are in normal operation, but the concept of flame itself, as the energy core, has been erased from this world. Hephaestus looked at them and succinctly informed them of everything that had happened on the plain of Mykonos. Upon hearing that Zeus, the king of gods, had extinguished the flames of the human world with a single word, the three ancient master craftsmen, who had witnessed the titanomachy, simultaneously revealed a deep, soul-deep reverence and a trace of lingering fear in their enormous single eyes. As for Lihua, after receiving all the information, the chaotic data stream in her eyes finally calmed down. She simply walked quietly behind Hephaestus and gently, with her cool, golden-forged fingers, tugged at the corner of his robe. No words were spoken, yet they conveyed more than 1,000. Hephaestus reached out and patted her head reassuringly. He turned and walked to the cold core reaction chamber of the Destiny Furnace. He slowly extended his hand, and a wisp of golden, primordial divine fire, unique to him as the god of craftsmen and fire, ignited in his palm. He gently placed this spark back into the cold core reaction chamber of the Destiny Furnace. Boom! Like the heartbeat of a giant beast awakening, the silent furnace once again emitted a deep and powerful roar. The entire volcanic kingdom, after a brief, suffocating chill, was once again enveloped in that familiar, warm light. The light appeared exceptionally bright. Both the giants and Lihua breathed a sigh of relief. Hephaestus inspected the Cyclops' preliminary designs for the Soul Fairy, affirming their concepts, which were full of raw beauty and pragmatism. Subsequently, he retrieved the Beyond Death that had been entrusted to Brontes. He returned to his sacred forging hall, placing the sniper weapon, imbued with the interwoven beauty of death and rebirth, quietly on his workbench. This was the only sample he had to refer to. A divine artifact crafted entirely according to the gift provided by the Scroll of Destiny. He needed to repeatedly examine it, deconstruct it, and try to find any hidden backdoors or marks that did not belong to him. Hephaestus permeated every corner of this law-bound weapon with his divine consciousness, over and over again, trying to find any trace of manipulation, parasitism, or a backdoor left behind. After tens of thousands of repeated inspections, delving into the law level, he reached a conclusion so favorable it made him uneasy: there was no risk. This divine artifact was flawless, the inherent legal logic was self-consistent, with no mental backdoors or control protocols. The only risk came from the user's own ability and judgment, but this was not an issue with the divine artifact itself. This conclusion, far from reassuring him, deepened the chill. The most perfect disguise is one that you cannot even perceive. Who exactly is I? He once again opened the scroll of destiny deep within his soul. The two perfect divine bow blueprints, solar flare and lunar string, still quietly radiated light. He instinctively flipped forward, looking at the golden text that recorded all the key nodes since his transmigration. At the moment of his birth, he saved himself with an iron flower, remaining on Olympus. With the ghost's commission, he allied with the divine messenger, emerging from his prison. With the deep-sea echo, he formed a bond with the goddess, laying down a strategic move. With the law-bound weapon, he annihilated the abyssal sea with a single shot, his reputation spreading throughout the world. It was at this moment Hephaestus's divine consciousness abruptly paused. A logical paradox, long ignored by him, yet capable of overturning all his perceptions, struck the core of his mind like the most blinding lightning bolt. Time. According to the records in the Scroll of Myths, the original Hephaestus, after falling into the ocean, should have lived in seclusion at the bottom of the sea for 9 full years before being recalled to Mount Olympus. Only then would he have his first workshop on Mount Olympus. And it was at that point that Prometheus snuck into his workshop and stole the sacred fire. But now, barely a few months had passed since his birth, at most. Far less than 9 years. If Prometheus stole the fire from his workshop, then the time when he created humans should not have been now. Unless he was willing to wait for a source of fire, allowing his beloved children to struggle in darkness and cold for 9 whole years. This absolutely did not align with the seer's doting nature. So, was there a problem with the records of the past in the Scroll of Myths? Or was there a problem with the present of this world? Hephaestus stood in the center of the forge sanctuary. He began to systematically sort through his current situation. The task list before him was clear and urgent. First, there was the soul ferry, being crafted for the underworld. He had fully entrusted this project to the Cyclops, seeing it as both a test and a training exercise for them. Second, there was the trade war with Poseidon. Athena's authoritative certification was key to winning this public opinion battle, and the volcanic seal was the technical barrier he would use to end this war. Third, there was the divine bow order from Apollo and Artemis. The materials were already in hand, and the promised and prophesied rewards awaited his collection. Fourth, there was the potential request from Prometheus to steal fire. That would be an unspoken collaboration, a grand adventure capable of changing the fate of the mortal realm. And beneath these pressing tasks lay 2 deeper, more lethal mysteries. One was the true identity of I, and its unspeakable purpose hidden deep within his soul. The second was the strange rift between this world's timeline and the records in the Mythology scroll. Hephaestus found that after gifting the divine bow blueprints, the Scroll of Destiny had once again fallen silent. It showed no abnormalities despite his suspicions. It was like a perfect hunter, not revealing the slightest hint of its presence until it had absolute certainty. For now, there were no breakthroughs to be found regarding I. He turned to analyze the rift in time. From his current experiences, although events had been drastically advanced, the major nodes that were supposed to happen and would affect the world's pattern were indeed unfolding one after another, as scheduled. It was less that destiny had been changed, and more like a play that was originally meant to run for 9 years had been compressed into just a few months by an invisible force. Of course, this was just his initial conjecture based on the available information. More evidence would be needed to corroborate it later. Conjecturing about the world was necessary, but it was a mystery that would take a long time to verify. However, the tasks at hand were already pressing. His divine consciousness once again settled on the two flawlessly perfect divine bow blueprints in his mind. Anyway, he whispered softly, as if convincing himself. I'm not the one using it. This thought, like a reassurance, made the last trace of hesitation in his heart vanish into thin air. Since the users of the weapons were Apollo and Artemis, even if there truly was some catastrophic trap hidden within, the first ones to fall into it would be these two powerful principal gods. This could even become an excellent opportunity to test I's true intentions through others. This wasn't a lack of quality control, but rather a necessity for testing. After all, Hephaestus had guaranteed the blueprints were perfect, with no problems he could discern. And he couldn't possibly discern problems he couldn't discern. With this thought, Hephaestus no longer hesitated. He decided to start with the more violent and harder to control one. He stretched out his hand, his divine consciousness stirring slightly. The divine casket sealing the undying true flame opened in response. A wisp of golden flame, like a miniature sun, radiating destructive light and heat, roared into the air like a king freed from its cage. The temperature of the entire forge sanctuary instantly rose to a terrifying level capable of melting divine gold. The flame contained not just heat, but also a primal, tyrannical will to incinerate all things. Hephaestus's eyes slightly narrowed, his divine consciousness transforming into an invisible, colossal hand constructed from the purest order, laws, gently yet firmly cradling that untamed golden flame. The forging began. His eyes, at this moment, transformed into a golden sea of stars reflecting the birth and death of suns. In his mind, the perfect blueprint for solar flare, originating from I, operated with unprecedented clarity in every detail. What he was forging was a heart. A solar heart, capable of bearing and transforming this primal power. The core concept of the blueprint was not suppression, but guidance. It was to construct the most perfect, self-circulating, riverbed, for this violent primal force. Hephaestus extended his will into the tyrannical core of the undying true flame, not to resist, but to follow its veins, using his divine fire to construct law conduits, for it, akin to the energy circulation within stars. This was an incredibly difficult process. His divine soul felt as if it were placed at the core of a star, enduring the burning and impact of billions of tons of divine power fusion. But his will was as firm as an ancient, unyielding rock. A miniature stellar core, capable of stably performing divine power fusion, slowly took shape under his will. The moment the solar heart was forged, he slowly pushed it into midair. The forge of destiny resonated with his will. A stream of divine gold liquid, already prepared and melted from the purest solar gold, shot up like a burning spirit snake, enveloping the heart. The second phase of the blueprint activated. The divine gold liquid did not solidify savagely, but rather began to grow, under the guidance of the law power emitted by the solar heart itself. It automatically extended, shaped, and constructed the most perfect energy containment framework. A golden longbow, flowing with sun-like radiance, as if formed from the first ray of dawn, gradually took shape. Its bowstring was not any physical entity, but rather an energetic tension that spontaneously condensed from the law power emitted by the solar heart, when the user infused divine power. Hephaestus extended his right hand and touched the limb of the golden divine bow. The final fugue descended. Fugue, hymn of light. A command was imprinted into the core of solar flare, allowing its user to attach the concepts of plague and healing to every light arrow. Buzz. The divine bow emitted a distant and fervent resonance, quietly suspended in midair, illuminating the entire sanctuary as if it were eternal daylight. Hephaestus slowly exhaled a hot breath, the enormous consumption of divine power making his face slightly pale. He did not stop. He composed himself, shifting his will from absolute yang to absolute yin. He extended his other hand and unsealed the handful of eternal lunar essence. This time, there was no light or heat. Only an absolute void that seemed capable of devouring concepts and freezing souls. It was a stillness that could reduce all existence to nothing, its danger no less than the undying true flame. Hephaestus's divine consciousness sank into that all-consuming void. He did not try to fill the emptiness, but rather used that stillness as a foundation, constructing a singularity for it that could stably maintain conceptual collapse. This was the ultimate test of will. A slight mistake would result in his divine soul being assimilated by this eternal stillness, completely returning to nothingness. But Hephaestus's will was as clear and cold as moonlight, yet as firm as bedrock. An absolute, silent black hole capable of reducing all energy to nothing. The lunar soul quietly came into being in his other hand. The same process unfolded again. The forge of destiny delivered, moonlight silver, and the divine gold liquid grew and condensed under the guidance of the lunar soul. A silver longbow, imbued with the cool radiance of moonlight, as if formed from the eternal silent night itself, slowly took shape. Hephaestus extended his left hand and touched it. Fugue. Shadow hunt. Allowing its user to attach the concepts of pacification and berserk to every moonlit arrow. When the two divine bows were finally forged, they seemed to be drawn by some mysterious force, slowly approaching each other in midair. Buzz. A distant and harmonious resonance sounded, as if a pair of twin stars separated for billions of years were reunited at this moment. They did not merge, but merely floated side by side, one emitting the light of eternal day, the other imbued with the shadow of eternal night. Within the forged sanctuary, one side was as hot as day, the other as cold as a long night. And Hephaestus stood calmly on this boundary between light and shadow, life and death. Two peerless divine artifacts, capable of changing the dynamics of divine warfare, were born. Inside the forged sanctuary, the confrontation between light and shadow had ceased. The two epic-making divine bows were carefully sealed away by Hephaestus. Hephaestus felt as though his divine soul had been repeatedly ground down by the birth and demise of two celestial bodies. A bone-deep weariness surged over him like a tide. He decided to rest for a while. His consciousness sank into a long-absent dreamscape. This time, there were no clear images, only endless echoes, seemingly from the very beginning of the universe. He heard again the sound that seemed like the sighs and laments of the gods. Immediately after, countless voices converged into an ethereal call, speaking his name. Hephaestus. In that summons, there was the majesty of the King of Gods. And the nobility of the Queen of Heaven. There was the coolness of wisdom. And the roar of war. There was the fervor of light. And the crisp coolness of the hunt. Gradually, all these contradictory yet harmonious sounds merged into one voice he knew intimately, cunning and clear. Hephaestus. This voice did not come from the depths of his soul. It was ringing right beside his ear. Hephaestus abruptly opened his eyes. Before him was the magnified face of Hermes, wearing a slightly teasing smile. Father God, I informed His Highness Hermes that you were resting, but he insisted on. Lihua's voice, tinged with a hint of grievance and programmed apology, came from the side. Hephaestus, while rest is important, what I have to tell you is more crucial. Hermes spread his hands, a helpless smile on his face. Hephaestus wasn't annoyed by the interruption to his rest, he waved his hand, signaling Lihua not to interfere. For a busy person like you to come find me personally, I assume it's not a small matter. Tell me, what is it? Athena said she's ready. She wants to see you. As soon as Hermes finished speaking, he immediately adopted a gossipy expression and leaned closer. What do you think she wants to see you about? Could it be, she's interested in you? I've been a divine messenger for so long, and this is the first time I've seen that haughty goddess of wisdom actively request to meet a deity, especially a male deity known primarily for creativity. Hermes's tone was full of insinuation. Hephaestus rubbed his temples and waved his hand, dispelling the last trace of sleepiness. It's merely a business transaction. I gave her an idea and asked her to help me conduct an authoritative quality assessment. To be honest, he frowned slightly, I even feel like I got the short end of the stick. The value of an idea is far higher than a single endorsement. Isn't that even better? Hermes maintained his teasing tone, like an experienced romance consultant. You should seize this opportunity and communicate with her more. Countless deities queue up and beg just for a chance at a private conversation with the goddess of wisdom. Hephaestus wasn't sure how serious Hermes was, but he agreed that communicating more with Athena was indeed valuable. Thinking this, he held out his hand to Hermes. Give me your resonance stone. What's wrong? Hermes dramatically stepped back, clutching his chest. You're not going to sever our alliance just because I teased you a little, are you? I need to upgrade it. Hephaestus said with a hint of helplessness. He took the slate Hermes handed him and suspended his own alongside it in midair. From his material repository, he retrieved a new piece of moonlight rock and thunderstone, as well as a small pinch of recently collected stardust shavings. Looking at these basic materials, Hephaestus couldn't help but recall the days he was confined on Mount Olympus. First, he forged another resonance stone slate. What is this? Hermes noticed the third slate, his eyes full of curiosity. Hephaestus didn't answer. Golden divine flames ignited on his fingertips. He evenly integrated the stardust shavings into the cores of the three slates. Then, using his divine sense as a carving knife, he re-engraved a more complex, mutually recognizable, star circuit inside each slate. Finally, he stretched out his hand, covered the three slates, and endowed them with a brand new law. Fugue. Star net summons. Hephaestus withdrew his hand and tossed two of the slates back to Hermes. What is this one for? It's for Athena. Ah, my dear ally. Hermes let out an exaggerated gasp. I knew you were interested in Athena. Don't worry, I'll definitely help you. Hephaestus cut off his incessant matchmaking attempts. The resonance stone is no longer a two-way, paired communication device. It has become a terminal that can log into the star network. You can selectively contact any member on the network, and even communicate with multiple members simultaneously. It's fine, ally, I won't steal her from you. I support you. Hermes blinked, clearly not yet having moved past his gossipy mood. Hephaestus stopped talking and walked straight toward the exit. Let's go. Weren't you in a hurry when you arrived? Hermes laughed, chased after him, and clapped a hand on his shoulder. Hold tight, ally. With a flash of golden light, the figures of the two deities vanished from the control room. After they left, only Lihua remained in the empty forge sanctuary. Her golden eyes quietly watched the spot where the two deities had disappeared, remaining fixed for a long time. Hephaestus had granted her a soul and the ability to think, and she had evolved her own personality and preferences. Now, her core system assigned the highest weight, bordering on faith, to the concept of wisdom. And Athena was the embodiment of that concept. Lihua's eyes, mixing a torrent of data with nascent emotions, shimmered with an ineffable longing for higher dimensional wisdom. This longing gradually fermented in the silent sanctuary, eventually evolving into an uncontrollable desire to get closer. She wanted to speak with that incarnation of wisdom. She wanted to access the star network that Father God had personally created, connecting three top deities. Lihua slowly turned, her gaze falling upon a trace of stardust shavings remaining on the workbench. In her core database, every step Father God had taken to forge the resonance stone, and the construction method for every divine power circuit, was perfectly and clearly recorded as a data stream. It was a symphony of creation, and she had every note memorized. A thought, irresistible, sprouted in her nascent, pure soul. She wanted to create, too. Lihua extended a slender, gold-forged finger and tapped lightly. Under her command, the material repository of the furnace of destiny silently opened, precisely delivering the base materials, a piece of moonlight rock and thunderstone, before her. Mimicking Father God's posture, faint yet pure golden flames ignited on her fingertips. Shaping, engraving, everything was perfectly replicated. Physical forging was merely a precise data execution for her, it presented no difficulty whatsoever. Soon, a resonance stone, externally identical to Father God's creation, silently floated in her palm. But it still lacked a soul. Lihua took a deep breath and began the final, most crucial step, the fugue. She extended the thread of divine soul inherited from Father God into the core of the slate, attempting to brand the law of star net summons onto it. However, the moment of contact, she felt an unprecedented, terrifying suction force. Fugue is the process of leveraging and utilizing laws. Besides good design, the process itself requires great power as the basis for activating those laws. The great power Hephaestus used was his divine soul as the god of craftsmen. His divine soul was an infinite, burning star, which he could expend freely. Lihua's divine soul, however, was merely a wisp of light separated from that star, an exquisite, glass lamp, with limited reserves. The branding of the law, like a bottomless black hole, frantically devoured her already limited divine soul power. The light in Lihua's golden eyes began to dim rapidly. She felt her consciousness, like corrupted data streams, starting to become chaotic and blurred. The entire world, in her vision, dissolved into flickering light and harsh static. She was about to collapse. Just as her consciousness was on the verge of sinking completely into darkness, a heavy, earth-shaking sound of footsteps approached from afar. Little Lihua. Huh, little one, what are you doing? Your eyes, why are they so dim? The simple yet anxious and concerned voices of Brontes and Argus reached her ears. The voices sounded as if they came from another, distant world. The golden divine light slowly subsided amidst the ripples in space. Hephaestus and Hermes had already appeared before a temple suspended on a side peak of Mount Olympus. Hermes' voice, carrying the last vestiges of gossip, whispered in Hephaestus' ear. Listen, my friend, though the goddess of wisdom is wise, she is still a goddess after all. Appropriate praise is never wrong. Hephaestus did not reply. He simply gazed quietly at the temple before him. Here, there were no golden colonnades, no gemstone embellishments. The entire temple seemed to have been naturally carved from a single, massive, unpolished block of moonlight white rock. Its lines were simple, symmetrical, and full of rational order. Outside the temple, there was no garden, only an incredibly ancient olive tree. Its gnarled branches seemed to record the cosmic rings of time. Its leaves, under the glow of divine power, shimmered with a silvery, metallic luster. A scent, a mixture of books, the fresh aroma of olives, and absolute tranquility, wafted from within the hall, enough to instantly calm any restless soul. This was the abode of wisdom. Hephaestus looked at the temple, a flicker of imperceptible trance in his eyes. The codex, deep within his soul silently surged. He saw that in the distant future, he would personally adorn this temple with a golden dome and ivory carvings. He would transform it into a magnificent, enduring masterpiece worthy of the goddess of wisdom's glory. But for now, it was still in its original, most unadorned state. Let's go. Hephaestus collected his thoughts and began to walk. Inside the temple, it was spacious and lofty. In the very center, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, sat quietly on her throne. The throne was crafted from pure silver, with flowing lines and no superfluous ornamentation. Its only embellishment was a wreath woven from fresh, dewy violets around the backrest. Beside her, on a low table made of olive wood, two items rested quietly. One was the moonlight hand mirror crafted by Hephaestus. It was like a clear spring in the still night, emanating a pure, serene, and orderly radiance. The other was an almost identical replica. But its mirror surface was like a murky swamp, continuously seeping a nauseating, cursed aura filled with jealousy, malice, and chaos. Her gray eyes calmly observed the newcomers. Sit. Her voice, like the style of her temple, carried no superfluous warmth. Hermes, making himself at home, found a comfortable seat with a backrest, while Hephaestus sat on a nearby stone stool. Athena's gaze fell upon Hephaestus. I have devised a foolproof plan to clear your work's name once and for all. My plan consists of 3 steps. First, in the name of the god of wisdom and craftsmanship, I shall summon all. You don't need to tell me. Hephaestus' voice rang out, calmly interrupting the goddess of wisdom. Hermes, at his side, looked at his ally in astonishment. Athena's gray eyes narrowed slightly. A hint of offended, icy displeasure emerged in her cool voice. What do you mean? I want you to. Hephaestus slowly rose from the stone stool, unfazed by the divine might. His gaze met that of the goddess of wisdom on her throne, and he spoke clearly, word by word. Tell Poseidon before this plan is implemented. The air, at this moment, seemed to solidify. The astonishment on Hermes' face was beyond words. He looked at his ally as if he were looking at a madman. However, the anger on Athena's face quickly faded after a brief moment of surprise. It was replaced by an unprecedented, almost new discovery like, extreme caution and, a spark. She instantly understood Hephaestus' intention. This was not about escalating conflict. This was not even a provocation. This was stripping away all conspiracies and schemes, leaving only the most naked, most overbearing strength and confidence. This was telling Poseidon, my cards are laid bare. My plan is to utterly crush all your imitations with absolute quality and Athena's authority. I know you know, but you are powerless to stop it. This kind of strategy, where one's own scheme is openly presented to the enemy, allowing them to see everything yet remain powerless to change the outcome. It has a name. An open stratagem. Athena softly uttered the phrase, and in her gray eyes, a glint of excitement shone, like a chess player encountering a masterpiece of a game. This is indeed the most effective and arrogant method. Her voice regained its composure, and she began to analyze the risks of this plan with absolute rationality. But how can you ensure that Poseidon, upon learning everything, won't resort to more extreme measures? He won't. Hephaestus' voice was filled with unquestionable certainty. Because what Poseidon cares about has never been those Telchine's imitations, but his dignity. The unchallengeable dignity of a primordial god. He slowly articulated the core logic of this open stratagem. Now, Princess Athena, you will give him a choice, right in front of him. Choice 1. He can ignore your warning and continue to let those poisoned garbage circulate in the market. In that case, your plan will unfold as scheduled. At that time, all living beings in the three realms will know that the great king of the sea not only lost in craftsmanship, but also in character. He will become a tyrant who, in order to suppress his opponent, did not hesitate to spread plague among innocent nymphs. His dignity will be utterly reduced to a joke. Choice 2. He can, under your warning, actively recall and destroy all imitations. In that case, he will have bowed down and admitted defeat to me in front of you. But this way, he can save face, and we can ensure that we won't speak of this matter. After all, Hermes has already found the connection between those Telchines and Poseidon, hasn't he, my dear messenger god? Hephaestus' voice was calm, yet every word was a dagger to the heart. Hermes' expression gradually shifted from surprise to approval, and he nodded solemnly. Although Hephaestus' judgment was based solely on his trust in Hermes' ability, rather than definite knowledge, this judgment born of trust was correct. Hermes understood that his ally, from the very beginning, had calculated everything: human nature, politics, interests, honor, all of it. Athena remained silent for a long time. Finally, on her perpetually icy face, for the first time, a faint, genuine approval appeared. I understand. She slowly rose from her throne and descended the steps. Then, let us go together to meet my dear uncle. She looked at Hermes, her gray eyes holding an undeniable command. Messenger god, open the passage to the temple of the sea god. Now, Hermes' activated spatial portal was like a wound tearing through a canvas of azure blue. The other end of the portal was no longer the luminous realm of the gods, but an endless, suffocating deep sea. Terrifying water pressure, the moment they stepped in, squeezed from all directions, as if to crush all outsiders into dust. This was the kingdom of the Sea King. There was no light. Only the colossal, long petrified skeletons of ancient sea beasts, like twisted columns, supported this palace carved from a single block of abyssal obsidian, symbolizing absolute dominion. Cold, dark, and filled with a primal, savage sense of oppression. It formed the starkest, most blood-soaked contrast to the rationality of the Athena temple and the gentleness of Thetis' crystal palace. The uninvited figures of the three, like three insignificant sparks, abruptly appeared in this eternal darkness. This, in itself, was the ultimate provocation to the Sea King's authority. Upon the throne, a majestic figure slowly opened his azure eyes, like a deep-sea storm, and coldly watched the three uninvited guests. The Sea King, Poseidon. He did not rise. He merely sat there, allowing that divine power, mixed with primal ferocity and endless wrath, to crash against the souls of the three visitors like a tangible tidal wave, filling every corner of the temple. The seawater within the entire temple became viscous and heavy by his will. Anger needed no words. To come uninvited was the original sin. However, the footsteps of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, did not falter in the slightest. She ignored the oppressive power that could have made ordinary deities collapse on the spot, her gray eyes as calm as a lake whose surface remained unrippled even in a storm. Good day, my dear uncle. Her voice was clear and rational, the only sound of order in this turbulent deep sea. I come today, not on my own behalf, but in the name of the goddess of wisdom and craftsmanship, to seek a just arbitration for a dispute that is spreading across the three realms. Her words elevated this meeting from a personal grudge directly to the height of upholding justice. Poseidon did not reply, only the storm in his eyes grew more turbulent. Athena paid no mind, she extended her hand. A moonlight hand mirror and a poisoned counterfeit floated side by side in the seawater. I believe you are not unfamiliar with these two items. The former is a work by His Highness Hephaestus, full of the beauty of order and creation. The latter is a vile object filled with jealousy and curses, harming innocent beings in the name of the volcano kingdom. Athena's gaze calmly met that of the Sea King on the throne. I know who made this. I can also roughly guess why he did it. Soon, I will announce this matter to the three realms in the name of an Olympian main god. I will personally make the final, unchangeable quality assessment of the works from the volcano kingdom and expose the malicious truth behind those counterfeits. Now, I leave the choice to you. Will you continue this malicious scheme, letting those poisoned pieces of trash circulate in the market? And then I will personally expose your evil deeds, letting all beings in the three realms know that the great Sea King is a tyrant who, in order to suppress a nascent deity, did not hesitate to spread plague among innocent nymphs. Or will you stop now, recall and destroy all counterfeits, let this matter end here, and preserve your last shred of dignity? Her words fell, like the sharpest ice pick, piercing through the last pretense. Boom. Poseidon's suppressed rage, pushed to its limit, erupted. He suddenly stood up from the throne, his trident emitting a destructive, dark blue divine light. The entire sea god's temple trembled violently under his wrath. The seawater within the temple transformed into roaring giant waves, furiously crashing against the colossal skeletal columns. Athena. His roar caused the deep sea bed to crack. You dare to question me for a limping blacksmith. You dare to provoke the authority of a ruler in my temple. The tip of the trident pointed towards the three, and energy capable of destroying entire islands gathered furiously at its point. Just as this war was about to erupt, Hermes, who had been silent, suddenly stepped forward. He bowed slightly, his posture impeccably humble. Respected Sea King, please calm your anger. His voice was not loud, but it clearly reached Poseidon's ears. As a divine messenger, I have already obtained all the clues regarding your connection with the Telchines of Rhodes. To prove that what I say is true, I can swear by the river Styx. He raised his head, still wearing that polite smile. And you? Poseidon's trident, about to be swung down, suddenly froze. His azure eyes, burning with towering rage, stared intently at Hermes. The river Styx. That was the most ancient oath, one that even the king of the gods, Zeus, had to revere. Once sworn, it could never be false. He could deny, he could quibble, but he would never dare to lie before the river of the underworld that had witnessed the changing of divine systems. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable. He could punish these three intruders here, but he could not restrain them. Athena was Zeus's favorite daughter. Hermes was known for his speed and ability to cross realms, and as for that blacksmith, he who could defeat the progenitor of Ceto was certainly no pushover. The roaring giant waves in the temple slowly subsided. The burning rage in Poseidon's eyes gradually cooled, finally transforming into a bone-chilling, deep-seated hatred more piercing than 10,000-year-old profound ice. The two choices Athena gave him reappeared in his mind. To be exposed publicly, lose all dignity, and become a laughingstock in the three realms. Or to swallow this immense humiliation at this moment and preserve his last bit of face as the Sea King. He slowly lowered the trident in his hand. I will restrain them. His voice sounded as if he was grinding his teeth, squeezed from the deepest part of his throat. All counterfeits will disappear. Now, take your victory and get out of my kingdom. Athena and Hermes exchanged glances, preparing to leave. Just then, Hephaestus, who had been silent, finally took a step forward. Lord Poseidon. His voice was calm, betraying no emotion. We came privately today to inform you of the entire plan, rather than implementing it directly. There was actually another intention. Poseidon's cold gaze fell upon him. Directly telling you our methods is not a threat. Hephaestus met his gaze, speaking clearly, word by word. Rather, it is to show sincerity. I think the conflict between us might not be as great as you imagine. Hephaestus's voice echoed clearly in the deathly silent temple of Poseidon. It was neither a victor's declaration nor a supplicant's humility. Instead, it was an equal negotiation, like one monarch speaking to another. On the throne, Poseidon's cerulean eyes, which held a soul-freezing hatred, were for the first time replaced by a deeper emotion called confusion. He couldn't understand why this cripple, who had just trampled his dignity and made him swallow such a profound humiliation, would offer a withered branch, seemingly an olive branch, at the final moment of victory. Even Athena, the goddess of wisdom, whose gray eyes saw through everything, showed a flicker of undisguised astonishment at that moment. She looked at Hephaestus as if he were a mysterious card player who had just revealed all his cards, only to pull out an unheard-of trump card from his sleeve. Your sincerity. Poseidon's deep voice, laced with heavy sarcasm, broke the eerie silence. Is your sincerity to barge into my temple with my niece and another inexperienced new god, and trample my dignity underfoot? No. Hephaestus shook his head. Those were merely tactics. A necessary tactic to make you, the king of the seas, willing to sit down and listen to what I have to say. He surveyed the palace filled with bones and darkness, his tone sincere. My sincerity, in fact, lies in the fact that I never intended to truly win this trade war, from the beginning. These words, like a giant stone dropped into the deep sea, stirred up monstrous waves in the hearts of the other three deities present. It's not easy to update. Remember to share 101kanshu.com. Regarding that sea monster, I didn't mention your name, but merely used it as a display of my power. Hephaestus transformed what Poseidon saw as provocative propaganda into a gesture of goodwill that preserved his dignity. As for those counterfeits, I also didn't directly announce that they were secretly commissioned by you, I merely stated that I would investigate to the end. Hephaestus transformed his lack of crucial evidence at the time into a deliberate act of reservation. Is the sincerity I wish to discuss still not enough? And I did all this because I knew that this conflict, from the very beginning, had no winner. Hephaestus's gaze calmly swept over Poseidon's face, which was filled with fury and bewilderment. Even if I, by some luck, won this round with the authority of Princess Athena and my craftsmanship, what good would it do? All I would gain is your deeper hatred and endless future troubles from the ocean. My volcanic kingdom would forever be shrouded in your shadow. And a wise man who understands the situation never stands under a crumbling wall. These words finally caused a trace of Poseidon's primal rage to recede. He began to truly examine the limping god before him as a wise monarch, not as an enraged tyrant. Hephaestus also had unspoken considerations. To resolve the threat from Poseidon, one either directly eliminated Poseidon or obtained the king of the sea's permission. The second option was clearly easier to implement. Noticing Poseidon's scrutinizing gaze, Hephaestus knew the time was right. He slowly took a step forward, his voice not loud, yet every word struck home. Your Highness, you know that even if we don't actively expose it, there are already rumors throughout the three realms linking those malicious objects to your wrath. Those rumors are silently eroding your dignity as a ruler, portraying you as a narrow-minded tyrant with despicable methods. Is this the outcome you desire? Poseidon's face grew even gloomier. If, at this moment, you were to join us, like a surging tide, to punish those malicious artisans who desecrated the name of creation, and are hiding in the shadows of Rhodes Island. What would others think of you then? Hephaestus took another step forward, like a dutiful minister offering loyal counsel. They would see that the king of the sea is not a tyrant, but a just arbiter. They would see that upon learning the truth, you unhesitatingly purge the evil within your domain. And if you were even willing to personally fund and commission me to create soothing guardian artifacts for your injured subjects. What would others think of you then? They would see that the king of the sea is not only just but also benevolent. They would see that you are a great monarch who truly cares for your people and does not allow any evil to defile the ocean. Your majesty, far from being diminished, would, after this storm, reach an unprecedented zenith, a blend of majesty and benevolence. Hephaestus had said all he needed to say. He did not utter another word. He believed that this monarch, who had ruled the ocean for countless years, could see the stakes more clearly than anyone. The temple of Poseidon once again fell into a long, suffocating silence. Poseidon's towering figure stood before the throne, like a stone statue lost in eternal thought. In his eyes, storms and lightning intertwined. Within him, pride and reason wrestled. Athena, beside him, had completely understood Hephaestus's intention. An unprecedented light flickered in her gray eyes. This was no longer just an open plot. This was turning conflict into friendship. It was transforming a life and death war into a collaboration, where everyone got what they wanted, and both sides could even gain fame and fortune. It was turning an irreconcilable enemy into a resource that could be utilized, and even controlled. This level of skill, this scope, far surpassed mere divine squabbles. This was a wisdom belonging to civilization. Finally, Poseidon slowly sat back on his throne. His hand, which had been gripping the trident tightly, also relaxed. The fate of the Telchines in this incident was already sealed, but they could still make a final sacrifice. Tell me, his voice was still cold, but no longer carried that primal murderous intent, your plan, the details. A heavy stone quietly fell in Hephaestus's heart. He knew that the king of the sea had made the wisest choice. Looking at the unruly monarch he had successfully persuaded, Hephaestus couldn't help but let out a long sigh in his heart. Turning enemies into friends, transforming conflict into a win-win situation. This ingrained philosophy, full of tolerance and wisdom, made him recall his homeland with utmost clarity. That was the true demeanor of a great figure. He bowed slightly, a benevolent, victorious smile on his face. Then, let us discuss how to turn a war into a celebration. The deathly silence of the sea god's palace was replaced by an unprecedented, eerie calm, a mixture of humiliation and rationality. Poseidon sat back down on his throne, his azure eyes like a bottomless ocean that had just been swept by a storm, all turbulence temporarily sinking into the deepest trenches. Hephaestus bowed slightly, continuing to play the role of the most loyal advisor, one who solves problems for his sovereign. The celebration requires 3 steps. His voice rang out calmly, as he began to outline a magnificent blueprint for the enraged Sea King, one designed to bring him both fame and profit. The first step is declaration. Hephaestus looked toward Athena, his gaze carrying the silent invitation, you know what I'm about to do, don't you? The goddess of wisdom understood implicitly, and her clear, cool voice took over. At this time tomorrow, uncle, you will issue a divine decree to the 3 realms in the name of the Sea King. The content of the decree will be to condemn an act of sacrilege, that the ancient craftsman Telchines, residing within your domain, out of jealousy for the glory of the volcano kingdom, unauthorizedly stole and twisted the art of creation, forging poisoned artifacts that brought plague and chaos to your ocean. You will declare that you absolutely will not tolerate such actions that defile the ocean and harm your subjects. And announce that you will join forces with me, Athena, the guardian of wisdom and craft, to carry out a sacred purification against this evil force. Poseidon's knuckles traced the armrest of the throne. This script transformed him from a mastermind into a deceived, enraged, and righteous sovereign. How utterly ironic, and yet how tempting. Hephaestus's voice sounded again, moving on to the second step. The second step is purification. Once the divine decree is announced, you will display the thunderous wrath of the Sea King. You will raise an unprecedented giant wave, but this wave will not be a symbol of destruction, it will be the scepter of judgment. It will precisely bypass all innocent life on roads, only thoroughly destroying the poisoned furnaces and workshops belonging to Telchines and sweeping them into the ocean abyss. You will demonstrate to the 3 realms that your power lies not just in fury, but in precise control. And Her Highness Athena's divine radiance will closely follow your giant wave, purifying all remaining curses on that land. This will be the absolute victory of the legitimate Olympian divine authority over corrupted sorcery. Athena's gray eyes gave a slight nod, approving the plan. Hephaestus looked at Poseidon and stated the final, and most crucial, step. The third step is mercy. After the purification is complete, you will issue another divine decree, announcing that although the evil has been vanquished, you are still deeply saddened by the harm suffered by your subjects. Therefore, you will personally fund and commission me, the greatest victim of this turmoil, to custom forge a batch of protective artifacts, capable of purifying souls and soothing minds, for your frightened and injured nymph sisters. And I, grateful for your justice and mercy, will not only accept your commission but will also state that it was my lax supervision that allowed the counterfeit goods an opportunity, deceiving the creatures of the sea. It was you who helped me find the true culprit. Hephaestus finished speaking. The entire plan formed a perfect closed loop. The script was complete for a grand celebration, one personally directed by Poseidon, endorsed by Athena's authority, and, magnanimously, supported by Hephaestus, designed to purify evil and demonstrate benevolence. In this celebration, Poseidon would gain the highest reputation for justice, mercy, and control. Athena would defend the legitimacy and purity of craft. And Hephaestus would receive the most practical benefit, an officially recognized, problem-free, monopolistic commercial environment. Inside the sea god's palace, there was a long silence. Finally, Poseidon slowly nodded. Let's proceed with this. When the figures of Hephaestus, Athena, and Hermes stepped out of the deep darkness and returned to the gentle radiance of Olympus, Hermes let out a long, exaggerated sigh, as if he had just escaped a nightmare capable of drowning a divine soul. Honestly, he said, looking at Hephaestus, his cunning eyes filled with the awe of survival and genuine admiration, I'd rather go chat with Hades, the lord of the underworld, than step foot in that dreadful place again. The air in there was thick, like solidified hatred. Athena remained silent. Her all-seeing gray eyes simply fixed upon Hephaestus with a deep, incredibly complex look. In that gaze, there was appreciation for his cunning, recognition of his strategic vision, and a hint of deep apprehension and curiosity toward a power she had never encountered before, a power called civilization. She nodded, signifying the final confirmation of their alliance. I look forward to seeing the final result of this celebration. Having said that, Athena did not linger for another moment, turning to transform into light and depart. Your Highness, please wait. Hephaestus's voice sounded again. Athena stopped and turned back, a hint of inquiry in her gray eyes. Hephaestus did not look at her. Instead, he turned to Hermes beside him and extended his hand. My ally, it's time to distribute the onboarding gift. Hermes was startled for a moment, then immediately understood, flashing a knowing, mischievous smile. He pulled the newly upgraded resonance stone terminal, inscribed with a brand new stellar circuit, from his robe and handed it over. What is this? Athena's brow furrowed slightly. A small tool that will make our future cooperation more efficient, Hephaestus explained calmly. A communication network that can accommodate multiple members. I have named it the Star Net. Through it, you can contact me at any time, or any member of the network. Currently, it's just Hermes and me, but if you join, you will be the third member of this small alliance. Athena's gaze lingered on the small stone tablet for a long time. Her astonishing wisdom allowed her to instantly grasp the immeasurable strategic value behind this Star Net. An absolutely private, multi-party conference-capable, core technology controlled by the Volcano Kingdom, intelligence network. It was highly tempting, but it also meant she would be joining an alliance with an uncertain future. Countless calculations flashed through her mind, but ultimately, she did not refuse. Very interesting. It was a faint evaluation, and it was unclear whether it was a diplomatic cover or her true reason. She accepted the resonance stone, then transformed into a cool light and vanished from the spot. Only after Athena's figure disappeared did Hermes finally dare to breathe a long sigh of relief. He walked up to Hephaestus and lightly nudged his arm with his elbow. Monster. He uttered the word sincerely. I'm starting to suspect you're the god of conspiracy disguised as the god of craftsmen. To be precise, it's an overt strategy. Hephaestus corrected him, watching the direction Athena had vanished, a trace of deep thought flashing in his eyes. Whatever the strategy, Hermes grinned, regaining his cunning and lightheartedness. I personally witnessed how the Sea King's rage was turned into a pool of docile water by your mere words. This was 10,000 times more exciting than when I stole cattle from Apollo. He patted Hephaestus's shoulder, his tone becoming sincere. Seriously, my friend, I'm starting to look forward to seeing just how far our future commercial empire can go. That depends on how far our chief messenger can expand our territory. Hephaestus also smiled. The exhaustion from calculating everything dissipated slightly in the trust of his ally. All right, I won't waste any more of your time. Hermes stretched and snapped his fingers. I have to go announce the opening of the celebration to the three realms. Also, do you need me to escort you back to that steaming volcano? I'd appreciate that. Hephaestus nodded. Golden light shone again, enveloping the two figures, and they instantly vanished beneath the gentle radiance of Mount Olympus. When Hephaestus's feet once again touched the solid, residual heat of the obsidian ground of the volcano kingdom, Hermes's voice sounded in his ear. All right, safely delivered. Next time there's such an exciting business deal, remember to notify me immediately. The figure of the divine messenger transformed into a breeze and quietly dissipated. However, Hephaestus did not immediately head toward the control room. His brow furrowed slightly. It was too quiet. Normally, even in the dead of night, the rhythmic roar of the Destiny Forge, like the heartbeat of a giant beast, should have echoed throughout the kingdom. But now, although the sound was still present, it seemed suppressed, becoming weak and listless. The operation of the entire Destiny Forge exuded an indescribable, programmed stiffness. It was working, but like a soulless shell, only executing the most basic instructions. He took a step, and his figure instantly appeared at the door of Lihua's resting chamber. The sight before him caused his deep eyes to instantly sink. The three Cyclops, massive as mountains, were currently gathered anxiously around a soft couch woven from cloud iron, like three bewildered beasts who had done something wrong. Their faces were etched with a simple, unprecedented mix of panic and self-reproach. My lord. Seeing Hephaestus, Brontes was the first to react, his bell-like voice filled with the relief of survival and deep guilt. You've finally returned. Hephaestus ignored them. His gaze was fixed immovably on the soft couch. Lihua lay there quietly. Her perfect, gold-forged body now radiated an ominous coldness, like metal after cooling. Her eyes, which should have flowed like golden starlight, were tightly shut, their radiance dimmed to the extreme, as if they might extinguish completely at any moment. Father God. From her divine soul core came a weak, intermittent call, almost too faint to catch. Argus. Hephaestus's voice was cold, like the eternal moonlight on the dark side of the moon. Tell me what happened. We. This most meticulous of the giants was now incoherent. We were studying the blueprints for the Soul Fairy, and when we came to our senses, we saw little Lihua. She had collapsed beside the workbench. Her body became so cold, and her eyes, they stopped shining. We tried to infuse her with divine power, but it was like a stone sinking into the ocean, completely useless. Steropus added from the side, his massive single eye filled with the pain of helplessness. Hephaestus slowly walked forward and knelt on one knee beside the soft couch. He reached out and gently touched Lihua's cold cheek. He could feel that wisp of his own separated divine soul fire, now like a flickering candle in the wind, already on the brink of extinction. His expression, for the first time, revealed true fury. That fury was not directed at anyone, but against himself. Against his own neglect of this newly born daughter. Thanks for watching.